Did somebody say road trip? Is it? It's just a mosquito in my car. Let's start with this. This is a map of Canada. This is where more than 1 in 3 Canadians live. That means over a third of Canadians live in one of these 3 places. Why doesn't anyone live in all these other places? Being as I'm from Saskatoon, I moved to Toronto last summer, which means that I think often about the difference between the two, as well as the various reactions I receive. Often people don't even know where Saskatchewan is. A whole province in Canada looks like this. If they do know where it is, it's usually kind of a, mix of pity. Isn't it really flat? And besides those kind of surface level reactions, there's a bit of assumption about who I am as a person because I come from a smaller province. And not only smaller, but more rural. And rural in this video is kind of being defined as anything smaller than the main metropolitan in each province. I wanted to understand the difference between rural and city, both the perceived and real difference, even within Saskatchewan itself. So that is why I'm in my car. We are going to head, first off, to the U of S campus, and we're gonna ask people what they think the difference is between rural and urban. Are you from Saskatchewan?
Yes.
No, basically I'm from India though.
When I'm an international student from India.
So how do you like actually living like in Saskatoon, like as a city?
Saskatoon, it's a tricky thing to say, I guess. Like in winter, it's pretty cold here.
Prairies. Flat.
I think probably historically, Saskatchewan was thought of as kind of the smaller, more less progressive type province. And because really Saskatchewan was kind of the economy was very flat for years, and probably about 10 years ago things started picking up.
There's some drawbacks, like there's not that much not that good nightlife.
Let's talk about facts. The outward migration in Saskatoon is one of the highest in Canada. And this may not seem like a big deal, but it's actually quite a big deal, especially the populations of rural communities just dissipating. I'm heading out to Stanley Mission, which is an hour from Laurent, and Laurent is 4 hours from Saskatoon north. We're headed out there because the northern experience is quite unique. I was lucky enough to secure an interview with Chief Cook-Searson, who is the chief of Ronge, and she invited me out to their annual, actually I'm not quite sure what it is yet, but some sort of gathering that happens, and she said there's lots of activities. What would you say is kind of unique about northern Saskatchewan in comparison to other rural communities?
I think it's unique because we're like one big family. We share the same values. We have a deep connection to the land. So you know when the fish are running, it's springtime. You know when the moose are getting nice and fat, when the leaves start to turn color. And then you know when it's time to pick the blueberries, the cranberries. Like right now it's time to pick the strawberries.
Like being rural, there are barriers kind of, and like it's hard sometimes to maintain that lifestyle. So how would you say that impacts people living in those areas?
I think it would really impact like here because we have the road access to all our communities. But in the far north where they don't have road access, it would be a lot harder, and the transportation of getting your food and accessing food, or even just supplies. If you're a commercial fisherman, for example, if you either have to fly out your fish, you know, all those things impact the way of life. When you're in the city, you don't even think of that. You have a grocery store in pretty much every, like the different parts of the city. Public transportation, you have a bus you can go on, but we don't have that. When we had the STC buses, the provincial government cut that off. And even here in Stanley Mission, you either have to take a taxi or hire somebody to take you if you don't have transportation.
So do you think that enough attention is given to the needs of northern communities?
I don't think so. I think a lot more attention needs to be given to northern communities. You know, a lot of the resources come from the north, and then they're benefiting people in the south. For example, the uranium industry. You know, people from northern Saskatchewan should be benefiting from the resources that are taken out of the north. I think as Northerners or as Aboriginal people, Indigenous people, there's always been the policies to colonize our people. And I think a lot more people are speaking up and calling it what it is. Because before, I don't think we had a voice. Now we have a voice. It's not somebody coming in there and saying, we're here to save you. The communities know what they want and they know how to get things organized. They know how to get things done. It's just getting them the resources to make things happen.
Oh my god, what was that? Some things I'm already noticing. In my research, it was talking about how, especially up north, road conditions is a super big issue, consistent throughout all of rural Saskatchewan. And also, we have the most rural roads, I think it is per capita, in like the entire world.
Hello, so today's a little bit different. I'm not in my car because I'm actually conducting the interview over the phone. I'm talking to Carmen Sterling, who is the Vice President of SARM, the Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipalities. I'm going to be asking her questions about rural living from an administrative point of view. Why don't we start with maybe just a brief overview of what SARM does and kind of the type of work that you guys do?
We represent all 296 rural municipalities in the province of Saskatchewan. On a voluntary basis, they are our members, and we provide them with representations at other levels of government, managing programs on behalf of the province. We also provide services, whether it be insurance and benefits, legal, community planning.
What do you think are some rural contributions you think are often overlooked, or maybe people aren't even really aware of?
At times it's maybe not recognized, the contribution that rural municipalities have in supporting industry. Oil and gas, there's potash development, agriculture, there's forestry. There's so many industries that happen in rural Saskatchewan that at times require a lot of service from the municipality or have a lot of expectations of a rural municipality.
It is a new day. It is morning. I'm going to be interviewing Serena Gamble, who I'll let her do her own introduction, but she's had experience teaching all over, including on a reserve. She'll be the expert, I think, in all things rural education. Sorry again about the engine. Smash that like button so that I can buy a new car. A big problem with rural education is lack of resources, including human resources like teachers or TAs, for example. And part of this is because a big way they measure is by birth rate. And obviously, in rural communities, the birth rate is much lower, and so there are way less resources allocated to those schools. And it's kind of similar with healthcare too. Clinics and stuff can't stay running if there's nobody who needs it. Except, obviously, there are people who need it. So then those people are left without the healthcare that they need. She used to live just under an hour away from Saskatoon, I believe. But she actually recently moved into the city. So I'm looking forward to see as to why and what drew her here. Because also anyone who's been moving between the two is kind of like the perfect candidate for the video. Because they, they've seen both sides. They know both worlds. It's the best of both worlds.
Going back home and teaching high school, it was not what I expected because I was a major in English with a minor in fine arts. And my first year of teaching, I got thrown into the science program, the high school science program. As teachers, we are the frontline workers. We are working with children. We see everything, especially when you're working in a First Nation community. The kids come in with a lot. In the city, what I seen different was I had to do more advocating and more awareness. The major difference was from working on the reserve, there was so much wealth of cultural knowledge. Like, it was not out of the ordinary to be able to just take them out onto the land and get that land-based learning and connecting with the land. Also feeling that sense of belonging and knowing where they come from and who they are. From working from a rural on-reserve setting to working in the city is the funding. And that's where we need to see a lot more equality. On-reserve schools, they are so underfunded. Back to working in inner city school, it was the cultural needs. There's that disconnect, not knowing really where they come from, because a lot of them, they probably haven't even stepped a foot on their home community. It's a luxury. You're growing up without all of the noise, the distractions of city life. And that's something that I really would like to see a change in the school systems to allow for those opportunities for elementary students to be able to have those experiences, to go learn out on the land. I can't put any blame on parents or anybody. The opportunities aren't there for them as much as for students that are living on reserve. I'd love to see a school where there is that balance between academic and cultural education.
So when I think back initially to why don't people live here? Why are these places less inhabited? I think the answer to that is resources. And maybe the answer then isn't that people aren't living here, but that they can't live here. That when people move, it's because they don't have access to the education they want, or the infrastructure that they need, or the opportunities that maybe more urban centers offer. But the important flip side to that, and I think what I was reminded of, was that even if you do move, it is very likely that you will come back, and that is because of something, bigger than resources, bigger than transit or what have you. It's, that connection to home and that connection to place. I think that you often forget how much there is to see within your own province, and also that, making the trip is a sign of respect and appreciation for the place that you're living in, and, to actually go and see it before you speak on it or before you form an opinion.
As far away as you may go, you're always going to come back home.
Comment down below if this video rules. You can put that in. That was funny. That was me high-fiving myself.